Throughout the ages, history has been altered by word of mouth and the misrepresentation of those who might not have been present when some of the world's most significant events took place. Channelers Barry and Connie Strohm bring through the spirits of those who actually witnessed or took part in these historical events and lets them tell their stories in their own words. Welcome to Channeling History. And now, here are your hosts, Barry and Connie Strohm.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Channeling History. We're the only show where we speak to the souls that made things happen. All our guests are on the other side of the life veil. And we're brought to you on the Marx Radio Network. I'm Barry Strohm, your host, and I'll be doing the channeling tonight.
And I'm Connie Strohm, your co-host. Tonight, we will be speaking with three famous economists, John Maynard Keynes, Milton Friedman, and Karl Marx. We will be getting their opinions concerning different economic and governmental philosophies in our modern times. It should be a very interesting show. We will not be taking a break tonight, so we can spend as much time as possible channeling our guests. I will be asking the questions as usual, and Barry will be giving the answers through their channeling. All of our shows are available on YouTube channel in Barry's name, or if you'd like to download them, just go to podomatic.com and search Channeling History.
Okay, we always give a small disclaimer because we have no idea what any of our guests are going to say. So the opinions or statements voiced on our show are the channeled words of the spirits, do not necessarily reflect our opinions, those of the Para-X network, or of our sponsors. And before we channel, we always say a prayer of protection because whenever we open a channel to the other side, it's possible that we may get some surprises. So Connie's going to say the prayer, and we'll begin to channel with our great guest tonight.
God, please grant us your wisdom and protection. Grant us the knowledge that we can handle and keep us safe from all things that will harm us. Keep the messages positive and pure love. Keep us safe from our egos. We ask these things in the light of the seen, the unseen, and the honesty of God. Amen.
All right, tonight is going to be very, very interesting. I know I've been looking forward to some of the questions being answered by these guys. All three of them have shaped our world. So, John Maynard Keynes, he was famous economist, born in 1883, died in 1946. He was an English economist and philosopher, and he changed the theory and practice of macroeconomics and economic policies of government. I know when I was in school in the 60s, we studied him very deeply. It was very, very interesting. He advocated the use of physical and monetary policies to mitigate adverse effects of economic recessions and depressions. His policies were adopted by most of the capitalist governments, especially from the 60s through the 80s. So, Connie, let's begin.
Mr. Keynes, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your knowledge. Will you please summarize your economic beliefs?
I believed that the Adam Smith type of hands-off economics no longer worked. The world was becoming very complex. I was born in the early 1900s. Monetary policy was not something that was studied. Well, it was studied, but it was not something where the countries had very effective policies. I saw that it was only the governments that could step in and care for the people. When the money supplies dried up, as in a depression, there were no safety nets. I felt that through government expansion, creation of jobs, that it would be possible to stimulate the economy. I felt that economic spending, even though if there were deficits, was what was needed as a stimulus. The times were much different. And I think that my policies did help many, but as in many instances, the politicians stepped in and took away any possible restraints, and that definitely had some very bad results.
As you said, you lived through the Great Depression. How did that affect your economic theories?
The Great Depression basically was caused by government inactivity. The government did not step in. It did not do many policies that it needed to protect the people. The 20s were a time of great prosperity. People really thought that this prosperity would last forever. Prices increased. The stock market prices rose precipitously, went to higher limits than anyone had ever seen before. And when people decided the market was too high, they stopped buying. And when they stopped buying, the market crashed. This took away much of the wealth in the country. Many of the businesses did not know how to react, as individuals no longer had cash for spending. The government stood back and basically allowed it to take place, thinking that the free markets would cure itself, and things just got worse and worse. I felt that it was only through government intervention that the Great Depression could be ended. I did a lot of work. I was in Great Britain. I saw how depression spread throughout the world. It was a terrible time. And my belief was that the only way was through government intervention that such things could be avoided.
What would you say are the main reasons that depressions and recessions occur?
I think the main reason is probably people's optimism that good times will never end. It's what takes place is individuals no longer have the money to buy products. If that money is not available, then businesses go out, unemployment takes over. The business cycle traditionally has highs and lows. That's the way it has always been. And monetary policy seems to have very little effect on it. You just came through a pandemic where people were forced to stay in their homes and were not allowed to shop and spend money. The repercussions of that were that businesses ceased to have income, people became unemployed, and once again, in spite of the fact that the government continued to print money as fast as they could print it, and that printed money resulted in inflation. When you have a great supply of money being printed by a government, inflation is going to take place. While the government did as much as they could and ran major deficits trying to offset the effects of what was taking place, the effects of the pandemic were just so great. There were things that could have been done, but once again, it was a learning experience. It was the first time that a pandemic had such an effect on the United States and the world.
Yeah, today, very little remains of what you would refer to as a free market economy. What is your opinion of the modern economic policies of the United States?
I think that the politicians have taken over the economic policies completely. When the Federal Reserve was established, it was thought that it would be an independent operator, that it would control money supplies and make interest rate decisions. Today, the government is inserting itself into any type of free market. The Fed is more interested in maintaining the individuals in political office. They react slowly to raising interest rates when they see that inflation is increasing. The government needs to step back. They need to, and I'm the one that spoke of deficit spending, but they need to step back and understand that a huge debt is very, very difficult to service. And as with any individual or with any business, if you incur too much debt, it will destroy you. The government needs to cut out waste. It needs to do what is necessary to run the government like a well-run business. As I watch from over here, many of my understandings of the way things work have certainly changed.
Yeah, do you believe the current fiscal and monetary policies can create a stable economy at all? Is there any chance at all?
The size of the economy is staggering. I do believe that it is possible to analyze all aspects of the business. I think artificial intelligence or the ability to study things that could never be studied before can establish a situation where the economy can be relatively stable. It can never be completely stable in my mind. I think there will always be fluctuations. There will always be changes that will have to be compensated for. But I do think the tools are available. What I do not think is that the will is available to use them properly.
You know, what changes would you make to our current fiscal and monetary policies?
I would make sure that the Federal Reserve stood independently of government policies. I would appoint the best people available to the Fed, and I would create budgets that would reduce the amount of debt that the government incurs every year. I would make sure that Social Security would be preserved. I would do many things, but essentially, I would try to have the true monetary policy run independently of politics.
What is your opinion of the current role of the Federal Reserve?
I think that it has just become another political tool. The Federal Reserve, when established a long time ago, was supposed to act independently. Today, there's no checks or balances on the Fed, and they will make decisions that obviously have political overtones. The Fed needs to be a truly independent organization where they have the most advanced, honest statistics. Government statistics are, in today's age, are often altered from the truth. Sometimes the individuals don't have the truth. The people need to be able to understand what is truly taking place in the economy and respond to it. Not wait if an election is coming up or make decisions that will affect an upcoming election to favor any political party.
What is your opinion of single payer or government health care?
It could be a very good thing. It could assure health care for everyone. The United States is an incredibly wealthy country. If that wealth was used effectively, it could create a single payer system that could establish health care for everyone. It could bring down the cost of health care. Sadly, if that single payer system is established, there would be many, such as the pharmaceuticals, that would step forward and take advantage of it. The government is run by people that receive political contributions. Pharmaceuticals give an incredible amount of money to the politicians. So, under those circumstances, a free market system would probably work better. But I do think if everything was equal, because of the size of the population of the United States today, that a single-payer system would work well.
Okay, you said that the Federal Reserve should become independent of the rest of the politicians. Are there any other changes that you would make to the Federal Reserve?
I would put more people on the board. I would try to have more individuals, the best economists in the country, on helping to make the decisions. But I would assure that there were no politicians or people that were beholden to any type of organization that were on the Federal Reserve.
Do you think that there's any combination, fiscal and monetary policy, that can lead to a stable economy?
I think that in the future, wise use of artificial intelligence and the capabilities of truly understanding can lead to a more stable economy. I do not believe that within the near future it is possible to totally eliminate the business cycles.
Okay, you felt that unemployment could be controlled by operating at a deficit. Do you still believe that?
No, I've changed my mind about that. I'm seeing that a deficit, huge deficits, can lead to unemployment. In order to get the deficit under control, you may have to increase taxes. If taxes are increased, then quite often that will have an effect on businesses where they have to pay higher taxes and their costs go up, and often that results in individuals being laid off and unemployment increasing. So the deficit, I never ever envisioned the numbers that the deficit is today. I felt that smaller deficit spending would give a stimulus, create jobs, and create employment. A huge deficit can actually have the reverse effect.
Okay. What are your thoughts on our current national debt?
I think they're incredibly large. Even though I was a proponent of deficit spending, what has taken place in your government is excessive. When interest rates go up, the cost of servicing the incredible debt adds immensely to the burden of the government and takes funds away that could have been diverted to helping others, to helping social programs, etc. So there is no doubt in my mind that some of the politicians have got to step forward and come up with a plan and a sinking fund that will reduce the national debt that has occurred.
What do you consider the modern key to reducing unemployment?
Unemployment has got to, if you want to increase unemployment in your modern economy, you have got to create a situation where employers want to hire. Now that seems like an obvious statement. If taxes are designed so that they do not destroy companies, that they are fair, that everyone pays a fair share, then they should hire more people. There should be incentives for employment. There should be reasons why individuals want to hire. Wage rates have got to be fair. They've got to be at a level that compensates for the higher costs of living. There has got to be government incentives to help people hire others.
Sir, what is your current opinion on tariffs?
In general, I oppose tariffs. I know now that you have to protect certain businesses in this country. You have to have incentives to bring businesses back. There are many, many countries that are using slave labor, cheap labor, and that are putting countries into a very non-competitive situation. There have got to be tariffs that protect those items. There are items critical to national defense. And you've got to have access to, for instance, computer chips. So there must be tariffs to help protect the industries in this country so that you are not dependent on unfriendly countries.
Sir, thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. Do you have a final message?
I want to thank you for allowing me to speak. It's the first time that I've been here, and I certainly appreciate the opportunity. In my time, I studied and tried to come up with concepts that were adaptable to the situations. We never conceived of economies the size that we're looking at today, and we certainly never imagined debt levels comparable to what is taking place. But if you get honest individuals in government, then it can be very possible to solve all of your problems. So thank you for allowing me to come through. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.
Okay, next we're going to talk to Milton Friedman. His economic policies were almost the opposite of Mr. Keynes. He was born in 1912 and died in 2006, was an American economist and statistician, and he opposed Keynesian economic philosophies. He asserted that variations in money supply control would have both short and long-term implications for the economy. As an economic advisor, he pushed for deregulation and minimal government intervention. So, Mr. Friedman, thank you for coming tonight.
So, Mr. Friedman, will you please summarize your economic beliefs?
I thought that if governments basically stayed out of the way, they guided, but they didn't create situations that would hurt the economy, then by staying out of the way, those businesses would be stimulated, they would hire, they would do many of the things that you needed to have a successful economy. I was blessed to be an economic advisor for Ronald Reagan. He was very conservative, and we managed to do a lot to reduce the deficits, the debt, through economic policies. We did a lot to stimulate the economy. We did many, many different things. But I basically felt that the biggest problem was manipulation of the money supply. If you just simply print money, then you will be making trends in the economy that will lead to a great inflation. You've seen that in the past several years. The Federal Reserve printed money like there was no tomorrow. They thought that they were doing what they needed to do, but now you look at the inflation rate. Once you start the reaction of raising interest rates to fight inflation, you hurt employment. If those interest rates rise to too great a point, then businesses can no longer afford to borrow. Many of them cannot afford to pay their debt. When interest rates are low, businesses incur larger amounts of debt because it's not as expensive to them. But when interest rates increase and their loans become more and more expensive, they have to cut corners to pay those increased debt expenses. One way of doing it is to fire workers. As unemployment increases, the social costs increase with it, and it sets off chain reactions. money supply has got to remain stable. The proper decisions have got to be made. But in my mind, that type of economic decision is the most critical to the economy.
Yeah, the United States is experiencing a high rate of inflation at this point. Do you think interest rate manipulation by the Federal Reserve is the most effective way to reduce the rate of inflation?
It is a way. In the past, you've seen huge increases in interest rates. During the Carter administration, you had a huge inflation rate, and they raised interest rates disproportionately, and it took a longer amount of time to recover from the recession that resulted. You have got to use moderation in interest rate manipulation because it is so critical. If you use it minimally, and if you are very reactive in your interest rate changes, then it is much more possible to reduce the risk of recession and even a depression if they would raise interest rates far enough. I think that, as I said earlier, careful manipulation of the money supply is another way that you can avoid having to get into interest rate manipulation. No, I do not mean free. I mean taxation rates and policies that are fair to everyone. All corporations should pay at least some minimal taxes. If everyone was taxed fairly, and I'm not meaning to be taxed excessively, but fairly, then it would be possible to reduce your debt. The service on the debt is outrageous right now, and it just takes so much money out of the economy.
Do you see any other way to reduce inflation than raising the interest rates?
Yes. Money supply. In my mind, it all comes down to money supply. If you do not increase the rate of printed money, if you do not use increases in the money supply as an economic stimulus, then you will not have the interest rate problems, and you will not have the accentuation of the business cycle that generally coincides with huge interest rate manipulation.
Did the government reaction to the pandemic make inflation inevitable?
To be honest, I believe that it did make some inflation inevitable. The government had never had to face a situation like that, and they were essentially unprepared to make the proper decisions. I think that the way the pandemic was handled was a huge contributor. Whenever you isolate people from the ability to purchase, you drive businesses out of business. I don't think that anyone in government was prepared to make the proper decisions. So yes, in this instance, I do think that the pandemic made inflation inevitable. I hope that the government has, and those making decisions, have learned from the experience. I would hope that they are not as reactionary as they were. It was a very, very difficult time, and I do believe that because of the decisions that were made due to the pandemic, that some inflation was inevitable. But I do not think that they reacted accordingly to that inflation.
What changes would you make to our current fiscal and monetary policies if you were in charge?
If I was in charge, I would start immediately by eliminating waste in government spending. There are duplications in government departments. There is huge waste. Every politician in Washington is trying to gain as much spending for their own personal projects at home as possible. I would attempt to, first of all, eliminate as much waste in government as we could do. I would review the tax code. I would assure that that all of the major companies, many of them which are incredibly profitable, pay taxes. I would do as much as I could to have an equal taxation laws. Today you see that there's much favoritism in taxation policies. Not everyone pays what they should be paying. The tax laws today allow people to accumulate great wealth. I would tax the very wealthy at a higher rate, and I would assure that we started to service the debt, that we did not do anything to increase it. I would try to get government to have balanced budget regulations passed. I would do everything that I could to run the government in the same manner that an individual has to run their personal finances.
Okay, what is your opinion of the current role of the Federal Reserve?
I think that the Federal Reserve is not as effective as it should be. As we watch from over here, we see that the Fed has become influenced by political decisions. We see that there are organizations that have influence over the Fed. I would try to reorganize the Federal Reserve to assure that all individuals that are serving are neutral and are making the proper decisions.
Are there any other changes you would suggest to make things better?
I would assure that they have access to the proper information. All of the governments lie about the statistics. I would assure that they have the proper information, and I would assure that they are funded to have the most advanced technological research available to them. And I would assure that they just simply take an honest and neutral posture in making their decisions.
Is it your opinion that the Federal Reserve has been politicized?
Absolutely. I don't think that any of the agencies, from your Justice Department to the Federal Reserve, have escaped the politicalizations that have been forced upon them.
Yes, that's very sad. What do you consider the key to reducing unemployment?
In order to reduce unemployment, you have to stimulate private spending on businesses. You have to assure that automation does not replace a great majority of people. You have to train individuals to adapt to changing conditions in the economy. Technological advances are going to eliminate many job positions. You have to assure that individuals that become unemployed through technological change are educated so that they can adapt to the new employment opportunities.
Do you think there's any combination of fiscal and monetary policy that could lead to a stable economy?
You can become a more stable economy. There are always going to be business fluctuations. Things will happen that you can't anticipate, such as that pandemic. But there are many things that you can do to reduce the size of the variations that take place.
Okay, our national debt is now 126% of our gross national product. What is your opinion of the national debt?
The national debt is the most critical thing facing the government of the United States. If they do not take steps to bring this down and continue to allow the debt to increase, then you will eventually reach a point that your government cannot service this incredible debt. So it is the most dangerous thing facing the United States.
Yeah, what do you consider the best way to lower the national debt?
Eliminate waste, fair taxation, let all organizations share the tax burden, increase rates in higher tax brackets, and reduce loopholes.
Do you think that there will ever be or can ever be a balanced budget in the United States, considering where it is right now?
Not with the current politicians. They have absolutely no ambition to balance the budget. Hopefully, the downgrade that just took place in the United States in their credit rating will open some eyes.
Yeah. Sir, thank you for joining us this evening. Do you have a final message for us?
Yes, I would like to thank you for allowing me to come through and to speak tonight. When I served our government, I tried to bring fiscal responsibility. We took measures to eliminate waste, and we tried to lower the debt, and we were quite successful in certain areas. Today, there have been huge changes in the government. The concept that printing money, the concept that there is no damage to deficit spending, these are incredibly dangerous concepts. If the government does not make decisions to curtail waste, to eliminate departments, duplications, to change the tax code to where it is fair, but that these people that have accumulated incredible wealth pay their share of taxes as they earn that wealth. I'm not saying that accumulated wealth should be taxed, but I am saying that as they earn that money, they should not be able to avoid taxation. If the economy is not aided in rebounding, then there will be many, many problems ahead. It is only through a strong economy that you will have any chance to reduce the national debt. I would like to see Social Security funded. After all, the deficits have come from the politicians stealing money from the fund, and that should be replaced. It is a very, very important social program, and it needs to be protected. So I thank you very much. I thank you for allowing me to speak. And I would hope that even a few people might listen to us and take steps to assure fiscal responsibility in our government.
Thank you, Mr. Friedman. I'm with you on that.
Okay, our final guest tonight is Karl Marx. He was born in 1818 and he died in 1883. Mr. Marx was a German-born philosopher and economist. He looked at things a little differently than we look at things today. His best-known work is the 1848 pamphlet known as the Communist Manifesto. He believed that human societies develop through class conflict. In capitalism, that involves conflict between the ruling class that controls the means of production and the working class. So hopefully, Mr. Marx is going to have some insight into what is taking place in our world today. So Connie, let's begin with you.
Thank you, Mr. Marx, for joining us. Will you please summarize your economic beliefs?
You have to realize that during my lifetime, there were many revolutions, there were many aristocracies. In Russia, there were serfs that were generally slaves to the Tsar. There were great aristocracies in the world. Countries were run by monarchs. The people were forced to work for little or no wages. The aristocracies controlled everything. In the United States, your government was facing civil war. There were many, many things taking place. Times were very, very different in many ways, but in many ways, times are still very similar. There are still many countries where people are being taken advantage of. If you look at a country such as Russia, you will see immensely rich billionaires, referred to as the oligarchs, that have stolen the money from the common working person. You can see this in many different countries. In certain countries, it's done through taxation rates. In many instances, governments have little control, that it's very, very easy for individuals to steal. The working class is always taken advantage of. Today, you're seeing vast differences. There are people that have accumulated riches beyond description, and yet there are people today that are suffering and cannot pay their bills. So as I say, many things change through time, but many things do not.
Okay, as you just said, there are a lot of individuals with incredible wealth and a growing number of people living in poverty. Do you believe that this is going to result in a modern class conflict?
It is quite conceivable. There are times that people just simply get fed up and join together. I do not think that in countries such as the United States, such conflict will take place. But there are many countries in the world where revolution, I believe, will still take place. There will be a time that individuals wake up and understand that the leaders are taking advantage of them. It is not a difficult concept. If you have people that cannot feed themselves, have to use outdoor toilets, and the individuals that are ruling the country have got 10 homes, then there will be a time that the people wake up.
Yes, in a socialist society, private property is replaced by cooperative ownership. Do you believe socialism can work in our modern society?
I do not believe it can work in a modern society. It has to have be in combination with certain democratic ideals. Individuals, I now believe, have to have equity ownership. If they own something, they're working for something. The experiments in socialism failed because many individuals, once they acquired an ownership, refused to work anymore. They relied on the labor of others. I believe that there are still circumstances where the government should own some of the institutions so that they can treat the people that work or live underneath them fairly. Now, unfair governments will not treat people fairly. So it is a very difficult situation. Pure socialism, I do not believe can exist in a modern society. But I do believe that there is a form of democratic socialism that could work.
So, why did socialism fail in the Soviet Union?
Because the leaders had no regards for the human life of those that lived under them. They became dictators. They did not believe in any type of social equality. They became politically oriented, and all they wanted was power. It is because of human nature that socialism failed. If you were in a perfect world, there could be a great equality. You see this great equality on other planets, but there's no way humans have a way of knowing or understanding about it. But the free will of humans make it very, very difficult.
Do you believe there's any way that socialism could have been successful in the Soviet Union?
I think that it would have taken some changes, and it would have taken good leadership. Stalin, Lenin, many of the leaders of the Soviet Union wanted power like any other politicians, and they did not care how many lives they took to obtain it. I think that communism, socialism suffered a great failure, and under those circumstances, it would fail again.
So then you don't see any way that socialism or communism can succeed in modern economies.
I think that if you incorporate some of the concepts with certain democratic ideals such as property ownership, and if you had leaders that were immune to the greed and to the inherent evil that comes with wealth, then I believe it is possible that it will work. The closest that an economy is coming to working under those conditions is communist China. But they are incurring great problems as well. Their huge population, the urge for world expansion is creating a requirement of funding that puts a great burden on the population. Many people in China are living in very poor conditions, and there will be a time that I believe that they will rise up and demand better conditions, and how the government reacts to those uprisings will be very interesting to watch.
So how would you go about bringing social change today?
If I was to bring social change today, I would create a government that cares greatly for the people, has many services. I would have a government with universal health care. I would have the individuals allowed to own their properties. I would have a type of taxation that was fair to everyone. I would have the government step in necessary areas. I would make sure that food supply was adequate for everyone. I would have the government control the educational facilities so that all of the people would have equal opportunity. I would not have educational institutions that catered to the elite. I would make sure that there was a great equality among everyone, that everyone was protected. I would have the government provide the military that was necessary for protection, but I would assure stability and happiness for everyone in that government, or that lives under that government.
What do you see as the future of modern capitalism?
I see that modern capitalism is degrading into a type of socialism. I do believe that combination, there is a combination of socialism and capitalism that can exist and that can survive. But each time that you see the governments become more and more involved, you see individuals in those governments try to take more wealth and power. Capitalism has got to be controlled by the people. There is much room in capitalism for social nets, for medical care, for instance, but the people have got to assure that the government is fair and equal to everyone. They have to assure the people that are elected to those governments are dedicated to doing the best they can for the individuals and not for trying to gain personal power and wealth.
Yeah. Did you consider yourself a humanist?
Yes. I was trying to have everyone reach an equality of life, of happiness. I was trying to create a system where the downtrodden could have the same quality of life as those that were in charge. I wanted people's lives to improve, so that I would think that would qualify me as a humanist.
Okay. Do you consider your theories of class conflict dangerous for a modern society?
Yes. I consider it much more dangerous today because of the weapons and the ability for people to kill one another. For instance, if the people overthrew the government of Russia and gained control of their nuclear weapons, there would be no limit to the dangers that could take place. I think Gandhi had it right. He was nonviolent, but he accomplished great things for India when he took over, when they drove out the British through peaceful means. Today there is great danger in physical conflict.
What do you see as the future for the economy of the United States?
If the economy of the United States does not control the national debt, does not make changes, and does not assure that poverty is reduced, that unemployment is reduced, and especially that the rate of inflation is controlled. Inflation is a great danger to the middle and lower class people. Inflation makes it impossible for them to pay their bills. And they have to make sure that those that have incredible wealth help spread that to help the poor and to maintain higher standards of living. If they do that, they should be able to evolve into the future.
Okay. As you look at the modern world, are there ever times that you wish you had never developed the concept of communism?
No. I still feel that the concepts that I came up with were possible to maintain equality among people and to help the downtrodden. What happened was people could not follow the pure concepts of which I conceived. Leadership took over. They were violent, they were cruel, and they did many of the things to destroy the basics of which I conceived. But I do not regret that I came up with those concepts.
Do you see any way that depressions and recessions can be avoided?
It's very difficult. If people would follow some of the concepts that I came up with, I believe that it would be more possible. Government needs legitimate controls. It is very difficult if they do not do that.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us, Mr. Marx. Do you have a final message for us?
Yes, I do. I believe that many of the concepts that I came up with for great equalities could be very useful. I think that people abused my ideas I think that individuals such as Stalin abused many of the ideas that I came up with. I think that the more people are treated equally, the better that their life conditions can be. Throughout the world, people are still abused. There's a caste system in India. Slavery is still rampant in the world. There are many countries where people are abused. The Chinese pay very low wages. They do many things to abuse their people. In communism today, people are highly abused. They're propagandized. They're not told the truth. They're not taken care of in the manner in which I conceived. If you could remove greed, power, hungry people, I think that many of the ideas of equality that I had could work and could prosper. I know that many people do not understand or have even taken the idea to really consider some of the ideas that I had politically. But I thank you so much for allowing me to speak today. I know that there are many, many problems in the country, especially in the so-called communist countries. But keep in mind, those people are not in those communist countries, are totalitarian governments, and are not of which I conceived. So thank you for allowing me to speak. If you wish me to come back, I would be happy to do it again.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, that was, I thought, extremely interesting. Next week, we're going to discuss the future of communications and social media. We're going to discuss it with Alexander Graham Bell, who invented the telephone, Nikola Tesla, who invented everything, and Steve Jobs, who was a leader in the advancement of cell phones. I'm going to have some very difficult questions for them, and I hope that you tell your friends and join us next week. You can submit questions or suggestions for future shows to our email, channelinghistoryonparax@gmail.com. We try to bring you a different look at history. We try to bring you reality and truth to it. So I hope that you will continue to tell your friends and continue to tune in for us.
I would like to say thank you all for joining us this evening. I hope you all have a wonderful week. God bless you all.
Yes, all of our shows are available on our YouTube channel. It's in my name, Barry Strohm. If you want to download them, go to Podomatic.com and just simply search Channeling History. So thank you for listening. Please join us Sundays at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on the Parax Radio Network.
Thanks for listening to Channeling History. Tune in again next week for another electrifying episode, as we never know who will make an appearance or who will come through the portal. Any rebroadcast or other use of this program without explicit permission is strictly prohibited. Copyright 2020. Our Story Begins by Kevin MacLeod, licensed through Incompetech.com.